So, for my presentation, I wanted to cover the importance of villains in stories and how they may not be focused on as much as regular heroes, but they are extremely crucial to the development of a plot and just a general story when it comes to the hero's journey. So, when looking at a story from this point of view, we first have to discuss what a villain is. Oxford Languages defines the villain as, in a film, novel, or play, a character whose evil actions or motives are important to the plot. While villains have much more value to a story than developing the plot, a lot of people tend to forget that they hold this role of being a way that the plot can develop. Villains are supposed to represent everything that's evil in the world, and more than often they prove it through their actions. We wouldn't have a hero without a villain, and good can't exist without evil. It's about balance, and that's what a lot of stories carry off of. Next, we have to ask who can be a villain. Anyone in a story can be a villain, but most of the time the role is held by those with great power. Yes, you can be good and have power, but more often than not, power can corrupt, like in Dr. Faustus. A good quote from this is, "Go and return to mighty Lucifer, and meet me in my study at midnight, and then resolve me of thy master's mind." That's from Dr. Faustus, scene 3, lines 98 to 100. In this scene, Faustus is called upon the devil, Mephistopheles, to make a deal with the devil for more knowledge, initially out of pure curiosity. But as the time progresses in the story, he quickly becomes corrupted by his power. This is a good example of someone going from good to evil, and it's a pretty classic example. So, what do villains represent? As a whole, villains are supposed to mirror the negative traits of most people, just kind of blown out of proportion. Many exhibit traits of greed, anger, and other similar kind of negative habits, but they take it to a level where it corrupts their character. This also doesn't mean that a villain will outwardly show these traits, but internally it's still the same thing that drives them. They take these usually human emotions and just push them to the next level. Why are villains important? Villains are important because they often serve an unintentional purpose of calling a hero to action. Their choices tend to hurt or affect the hero in some way, leading them to go on a journey. Many greatly written villains do push beyond this traditional dynamic, though, giving the reader second thoughts about who to support or what side they're on. They find good ways to weave their morals into what would traditionally be considered good, so it's kind of hard to determine a set motive from some villains. So next I wanted to include the idea of a non-traditional villain. Non-traditional villains aren't exactly an official classification, but using it can kind of help someone understand what makes a villain new or interesting. Traditional villains may typically come off as one-dimensional with a simple motive behind their actions that fits the character. Non-traditional villains tend to act morally gray and may use their influence or power in changing ways. They're complex and harder to understand or grasp. Good examples of some non-traditional villains from literature could be the Devil from Paradise Lost. The Devil is an interesting example of a dynamic villain, even after being analyzed a million times over by scholars. He leaves his mark on the reader by acting charming and attractive, leading most to question if he's a villain in the first place. Plenty of people just consider him flat out as a hero. Of course he's a villain, with this quote, "Those rigid threats of death, ye shall not die, how should ye? By the fruit, it gives you life to knowledge." That's from Paradise Lost, line 685, 686. In this, the devil was disguised as a snake, and he uses charming techniques to convince Eve to eat from the forbidden tree. I just wanted to throw in my own sort of nerdy modern example. A great modern example of a dynamic villain could be King Bradley from Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. On the outside, he's kind of a gracious leader, but his internal motives are a lot darker than you think. It's revealed through the plot of the show that he's not even human in the first place, and he's been planning to use the population of the country he rules for mass human sacrifice. It's really strange from this first description, but as you watch the show, you can see just how dangerous he is, and initially he doesn't come off as that, so it's a really interesting villain.